My name is Lillian Cross. I'm 33 years old. And 2 weeks ago, I stood under a glass pavilion in Napa Valley while a string quartet tried to keep playing over the sound of my younger sister laughing as she read a message out loud that my own father had just sent to every guest at my wedding. It said, "Ask her why she really left home before you congratulate her." At first, people thought it was a mistake. Phones lit up across the tables, one by one, like a quiet wave of confusion moving through the crowd. Then someone near the front actually said it out loud. Then another. Then all at once, the music faltered. Conversations stopped, and the air shifted in a way I felt before I even understood what was happening. My husband turned toward me slowly. Not angry. Not yet. Just searching my face for something he didn't want to believe. And before I could say a single word, my sister stood up. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She smiled. And then she told everyone that I had been lying to my husband about why I cut ties with my family 6 years ago. She said I didn't leave because I wanted independence. She said I left because I had stolen from them. The word hung there. Stolen, simple, ugly, effective. My father didn't need to stand up after that. He stayed seated watching like he had already done his part. Mother didn't look surprised. She looked satisfied. And in that moment, with 120 people staring at me, waiting for me to either defend myself or fall apart, I did something no one in my family expected. I smiled. Not because I was okay, not because I forgave them. I smiled because they had just made the one mistake I had been waiting for them to make for 6 years. They said it out loud. Publicly. Where it could not be taken back. Before I tell you what happened after my husband asked me one quiet question that changed everything, tell me this. Where are you reading this from right now? And what time is it where you are? Because I want to know how far this story travels before my family realizes they didn't just try to ruin me. They exposed themselves. I grew up in a suburb outside Sacramento, California, in a house that always smelled like polished wood and something just slightly burned. My parents owned a company called Cross Logistics Group. On paper, it was a mid-sized distribution business specializing in medical supplies and temperature-sensitive shipments. In reality, it was a control system disguised as a family business. From the outside, we looked disciplined, successful, close. My father spoke at industry events. My mother hosted charity dinners. My sister Ava was always described as charismatic, confident, a natural leader. And me? I was the reliable one. The one who didn't make noise. The one who fixed things quietly so other people could take credit loudly. By the time I was 16, I was already reviewing shipment logs, catching discrepancies, correcting documentation errors, and building internal spreadsheets that kept the company from violating regulations that would have shut them down overnight. No one called me talented. They called me helpful. There's a difference. Helpful people are expected to stay. Talented people are allowed to leave. My sister could forget entire client meetings and still be described as visionary. I could prevent a compliance audit failure and still be told I was just doing what I was supposed to do. Because in our house, there was one rule that mattered more than anything else. Family comes first. But what that really meant was, family comes first when it benefits them. When I turned 18, I left for college in Chicago and studied regulatory compliance and supply chain law. My father called it a phase. My mother called it ungrateful. My sister called it running away. But I knew exactly what I was doing. I was building a life where I could not be pulled back in. After graduation, I moved to Seattle and started working for a healthcare distribution company that actually followed the rules. I wasn't just good at my job, I was precise. I built audit systems that flagged issues before they became violations. I documented processes so clearly that no one could pretend they didn't know what they were doing. I made accountability unavoidable. And my family hated that. Not openly, not directly. But every phone call, every holiday visit, every passive comment carried the same message. You left us. You owe us. You think you're better than us. Meanwhile, their business started slipping. At first, it was small things, late deliveries, minor documentation gaps, a client that didn't renew a contract. Then it got worse. Regulatory warnings, employee complaints, vendors asking for upfront payments. And every time something went wrong, my father would call me. Not to ask how I was, to ask how to fix it. And for years I helped. I sent templates, I reviewed documents, I corrected their mistakes from 800 miles away for free, because I was still trying to be the daughter they might someday respect. That stopped the day I realized something. They didn't want me back because they loved me. They wanted me back because I was useful. So I started documenting instead of fixing. Every time my father emailed me a contract to take a quick look, I saved a copy. Every time my sister forwarded internal reports with missing data, I archived them. Every time someone admitted, casually, that they were cutting corners to save money, I wrote it down. Not because I planned revenge, because I finally understood something simple. People who rely on your silence will always panic when you stop giving it to them. Then I met Daniel. He was a structural engineer, quiet in a way that felt steady instead of distant. The kind of man who didn't need to dominate a room to be respected in it. When he met my family, everything shifted. Not because they liked him, because he saw them. After one dinner, he looked at me and said, "You don't owe them your life just because they're related to you." No one had ever said it that clearly before. When he proposed, my family didn't celebrate. They evaluated. My father asked what Daniel's income was. My mother asked whether I planned to slow down my career for marriage. My sister asked if Daniel knew the full story about me. I told them they were invited to the wedding as guests. Nothing more. That was when my father went quiet. And in my family, silence was never acceptance. It was strategy. The wedding was planned in Napa. Simple, elegant, controlled. Everything my family hated. The morning of the ceremony, I woke up calm. Not because I trusted them, because I didn't. I knew something would happen. I just didn't know how far they would go. Now I do. And the truth is, the message wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what came next. Because after my sister finished speaking, after the guests started whispering, after Daniel turned to me and asked quietly, "Is any of that true?" I answered him. And then I turned to my father. And I said something I had been preparing to say for 6 years. And that's when everything really began. I looked at Daniel. Not at the guests, not at my sister, not at my mother, who was already watching my face like she was waiting for the exact second I would crack. Just at him. And I said, calmly, clearly, without rushing a single word, "No, none of it is true." There was a pause. Not a dramatic one. Not loud. Just the kind that happens when truth lands quietly but heavily enough that people feel it before they react to it. Daniel didn't look relieved immediately. He looked focused. Like he was measuring the weight of everything happening against the one thing that mattered. Whether he believed me. Then he nodded once, and that was it. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't turn to my family. He didn't hesitate. He turned back toward the officiant and said, "Continue." That should have been the end of it. But my family had never understood when to stop. My sister laughed, loud enough to pull attention back to her. "Oh, we're just going to ignore it?" she said, lifting her phone again like she was still performing for an audience. "We're pretending she didn't take money from the company right before she disappeared?" There it was again. Clearer this time. Sharper. More specific. More dangerous for them than they realized, because vague accusations create doubt. Specific accusations create liability. I turned to her slowly, not angry, not shaking, just done. "Say exactly what you think I took, Ava," I said. The room shifted again. People weren't just watching anymore. They were listening. My sister hesitated for half a second. That was the first crack. But then she pushed through it, like she always did when confidence mattered more to her than accuracy. 120,000, she said. "Right before you left. That's why you never came back." A few people gasped. My mother finally stood up beside her, placing a hand lightly on her arm like she was supporting her, but really controlling the moment. "We didn't want to do this here," she said, her voice soft in that practiced, sympathetic tone she used when she wanted to look reasonable. "But Daniel deserves to know who he's marrying." I almost smiled again. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. They had built a story. Rehearsed it. Refined it. But they had never expected me to answer it. I stepped slightly forward, turning just enough so I could see both my family and the guests, and then I said something that changed the direction of the entire day. "Do you want to tell them about the audit?" Silence. Real silence this time. My father's expression didn't change immediately, but his eyes did. That was the second crack. My sister blinked. "What audit?" she snapped, too quickly. "Exactly. What audit?" I repeated softly. Then I looked back at the guests. 6 years ago, right before I left, Cross Logistics Group was flagged for an internal compliance review, I said. Not because of missing money, because of missing documentation tied to high-risk shipments. Now people were very still. When I found the discrepancies, I reported them internally, I continued, because that was my job. Fix the problem before it becomes a violation. My mother's voice cut in, sharper now. "This is not the place. It became the place when you accused me of a crime at my own wedding," I said, still calm. That shut her up. So I kept going. "The $120,000 she's talking about?" I said, glancing briefly at Ava. "It wasn't stolen. It was reallocated during a correction process after funds were miscategorized across multiple vendor accounts." My father finally spoke. "You moved money without authorization," he said, his voice low, controlled, but tight enough that I could hear the pressure underneath it. "No," I said. "I documented improper allocation and corrected it under the compliance authority you gave me access to." That part mattered. Authority, permission, records. Things my family had never respected because they had never expected to be held to them. "You left right after," my sister snapped. "That's not suspicious?" "I left after I was told to stop documenting inconsistencies," I said. Now the room wasn't just quiet. It was tense, because this was no longer a family argument. This sounded like something else entirely, something real, something with consequences. Daniel stepped closer to me, not in front of me, not shielding me, beside me, exactly where I needed him to be. "Is there documentation of that?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yes." My father exhaled sharply. "You're really doing this?" That question almost made me laugh. Doing what? Telling the truth? Out loud? In public? The same way they had just tried to bury me? "I didn't start this," I said. And then I reached for the small clutch I had placed on the table earlier that morning. Inside was my phone. And inside my phone was everything. Emails, time-stamped reports, internal logs, authorization chains, corrections, warnings, replies that told me to let it go. I didn't wave it around. I didn't dramatize it. I just held it. Calmly. "I kept records," I said, "because I knew one day you might try to rewrite what happened." My mother's composure cracked completely for the first time. "You're trying to humiliate us," she said. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. "I didn't hire a mass message to accuse you of theft during your wedding," I said. That landed. Hard. Behind us, one of Daniel's relatives let out a quiet, disbelieving breath. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." My sister lowered her phone slightly, not because she was ashamed, because she was recalculating. This was no longer going the way she expected. But they still weren't done. They never were. My father stepped forward one more time, and this time he changed tactics. "If you have nothing to hide," he said, "then show everyone." There it was. The trap. Escalation. Push her into proving everything right now, in the middle of her own wedding, in front of everyone. Force chaos, force emotion, force mistakes. It had worked on me before. For years. But not anymore. I shook my head once. No. That confused them more than anything else I had said so far. "No," my sister repeated. "No," I said, "because this isn't a performance." I paused just long enough for that to sink in. If you want to make accusations, you can do it properly. With attorneys, with records, with consequences. Now my father looked angry, not controlled, not strategic, just angry. "Consequences," he repeated. "Yes," I said. And then I said the one thing that shifted the balance of power completely. "I never signed the non-disclosure agreement you tried to send me after I left." That hit harder than anything else, because now they understood. This wasn't just a family argument anymore. This was exposure. Real exposure. Legal exposure. My sister went quiet. My mother sat down slowly, and my father, for the first time in my life, had nothing immediate to say. The officiant cleared his throat softly, unsure whether to continue or disappear entirely. Daniel looked at me again. Not questioning, not uncertain, just steady. "Do you still want to do this?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "Yes." And just like that, we went back to the ceremony. But everything had changed, because now it wasn't just a wedding. It was a line. And my family had just crossed it in front of 120 witnesses. They thought they were exposing me. They didn't realize they had just given me exactly what I needed. And that night, while they sat at their table pretending nothing had happened, I started setting everything in motion. And what came next was something they were not prepared for. That night, after the reception ended, nobody left the venue the way they were supposed to. People lingered too long, speaking in low voices, replaying what had happened as if they were trying to decide whether they had actually witnessed it or just watched a moment collapse in real time. Daniel's hand stayed on mine the entire time, steady, grounding, like he understood that something inside me had finally stopped bending and started locking into place. My family didn't approach us again. Not immediately. That was new. My father sat at the far table, untouched glass in front of him, staring at nothing in particular. My mother kept checking her phone like it might offer her a different version of reality. My sister was gone within 20 minutes, the same confidence she had walked in with, now replaced by something sharper and more erratic. Fear doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like calculation that no longer works. We didn't go to a hotel that night. We went home. And for the first time since the wedding started, silence didn't feel like tension. It felt like space. The next morning, I woke up to something I expected and something I didn't. The expected part was the messages. Dozens of them. Some angry, some confused, some pretending to be concerned, some openly hostile. But the unexpected part was how quickly the narrative had already started shifting outside my family's control. Someone had uploaded a full recording of the wedding speech segment. Not edited, not framed, just raw footage. My sister standing, my father speaking. The moment Daniel didn't react the way they expected. My response. And most importantly, the silence after. That silence did something my family never accounted for. It made people question who needed to be believed. By noon, Daniel's phone was ringing with calls from his relatives. Mine was filling with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, and my attorney sent me a single line. They are going to escalate. He was right. They always escalated when control started slipping. But this time, I was already ahead of them. Because while my family had been focused on controlling person, I had been building structure. Not revenge. Structure. That afternoon, I met with my attorney in person for the first time since the wedding. I brought everything, documentation I had collected for years, the internal messages, the financial inconsistencies, the communication history, the audit logs I had saved quietly when no one thought I understood what I was doing. He looked through it without speaking for a long time. Then he finally said, "They've been exposed before. They just didn't know it." That was the difference. My family had never been careful. They had only been confident no one would ever connect the pieces. But confidence is not protection. Documentation is. 2 days later, the first formal notice went out. Not emotional, not dramatic, legal. My father's company had been using shared compliance infrastructure I had helped design without maintaining proper internal authorization tracking for years. My sister had signed off on operational decisions she had no regulatory clearance for. And my father had approved financial reallocations that, when properly reviewed, created a paper trail no one had ever thought would be examined in reverse. I didn't accuse them publicly. I didn't need to. The documents did it for me. The documents did it for Meek. Their business attorney requested a private meeting. My attorney declined. Instead, he sent additional documentation. And that was when the shift happened. Because now, for the first time, my family wasn't reacting emotionally. They were reacting structurally. And structurally, they were exposed. My mother tried one last attempt at control. She posted a statement online about misunderstood family conflict and distorted narratives being spread by people seeking attention. But this time, it didn't land the way she expected, because screenshots exist longer than intentions. And witnesses remember longer than families expect. People who had been at the wedding started commenting publicly. Calmly, clearly, not angry, not dramatic, just factual. Yes, the plane happened. Yes, the accusation happened. Yes, the envelope happened. Yes, the live stream happened. And slowly, the tone changed, not to outrage, to certainty. My sister tried to defend herself in comments for exactly 1 day before deleting everything again. That deletion mattered more than the posts ever did. Because deletion is what people do when they realize they can no longer control visibility. 3 weeks after the wedding, my father came to my apartment. This time, he didn't park far away. He didn't wait. He came straight to the door, like someone who still believed authority could be restored through presence alone. I opened it. Daniel stood behind me, but didn't interfere. My father looked older than I remembered. Not physically, something in posture, something in certainty. He didn't start with anger. That was gone now. He started with negotiation. "We can fix this," he said. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. Fix meant undo. Undo meant erase. Erase meant return. Return meant control. "No," I said. He blinked like he hadn't expected that answer to still exist. "This is still your family," he said. That was the final lever they always pulled. The last emotional claim. The last ownership language disguised as love. And I realized something standing there. They were not angry that I had exposed them. They were angry that I had stopped needing them. "I used to think that mattered," I said quietly. "Family." My father stepped forward slightly. "It does matter." "No," I said. "Access mattered to you." Silence again, but different this time. Not charged, not waiting, just ending. "I'm not asking for reconciliation," he said. I nodded. "I know." Then I said the part that closed the door completely. "And I'm not offering it." He stared at me for a long time, like he was trying to find the version of me that would still soften under pressure. But that version wasn't there anymore. Finally, he spoke. "You think you've won?" I almost smiled. "No," I said. "I think I stopped playing." That was the last time he came to my door. Months passed, the business stabilized, but only after restructuring under legal oversight. The contracts changed, authority lines changed, accountability changed. The system they built on assumption had to adapt to reality. My sister stopped posting entirely. My mother stopped publicly referencing me. My father stopped calling, not because everything was resolved, because nothing worked anymore. And somewhere in that silence, something unexpected happened. My life became quieter, not smaller, quieter. Daniel and I built something that didn't rely on fear, obligation, or performance. His family never asked me to explain myself to be accepted. They didn't need proof of worth. They just made space. And slowly, I realized something I had never been taught growing up. Peace is not something you earn by surviving chaos. It is something you choose by walking away from it. The last time I saw my family was not dramatic. It was at a distance. A chance encounter months later at a public event. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say that required noise. My mother looked at me like she wasn't sure whether to feel anger or loss. My father avoided my eyes entirely. My sister looked down first. That told me everything I needed. Not guilt. Not regret. Recognition that the version of me they could control no longer existed in their reach. And that was enough. Because the truth is, I didn't win against my family. That's not what this was. I just stopped losing myself to them. And sometimes that is the only ending that matters. So if you are listening to this and wondering whether silence is safer than truth, it isn't. It only feels safer to the people who benefit from it. But the moment you stop protecting people from the consequences of their own actions, you don't become cruel. You become free. And freedom, once you've actually felt it, doesn't require permission from anyone who ever tried to take it from you.